All right, so we are going to demonstrate how the 10-level cluster management model works with the Excel template we have developed. So for every cluster supervisor, this folder will be shared. And so this folder, which is for each supervisor, has all these files. It's important that this folder moves along with all the files. So all the files must be inside this folder. Whatever that will cause the file to be removed from this folder may likely cause the linkages not to work properly. So let me first of all explore what we have in this folder. We can see that the first file here, which is a workbook, is called the 10-level cluster performance management supervisor, which means this is the supervisor's, we may call it his workbook. And if we open it, we will see that it has sheets labeled after each of the staff under him. So when you open this, the likely thing is you will see this prompt. It's always good to click enable content. This is because each of these sheets is linked to this staff 1 to up to 10 staff. There are some content in each of these that is linked here, and there are some components in this supervisor level that are linked to each of these staff files. So it's important to always click this enable content. Now when you open this is shaking hands. See this sheet labeled staff 1 is shaking hands with this one here. The same way, the content on this second sheet shakes hand with the content in this part staff 2, and so on and so forth. So this is designed for a model that has 10 supervisees assigned to one supervisor. So one of the things we advocate is to decentralize the supervision such that it can break them down into 4, 3, 5, 6 supervisees attached to one supervisor. If in any case it exceeds the normal 5 that we recommend, it should not exceed 10. And so this was not designed to accommodate a model that is supervising more than 10 staff. Now, like we said, this folder is to be hosted in a cloud space, and then that space should either be accessible to the supervisor or to a general point in the cloud where there is a central administrator who now creates and shares the links to each of the persons concerned. So for this demonstration, we are going to look at a situation where this is reposited on the cloud that is owned by the supervisor. So, but the workings are the same, whether it is deposited on the supervisor's space or not. The important thing is the supervisor has the link that opens to this workbook. Staff number 1 has the link that opens to this workbook. Staff number 2 to this, up to the number of supervisees that are attached to this supervisor. Now, the first place to start is coming to this staff list. So you can see that in this staff list, the supervisor has this table, and on column A, you have the staff numbers or the IDs. Nothing should be done here. There's no need to change the names or whatsoever. Changing them may affect the working. So all we need to do is to come here and assign the names of those that you are supervising to a staff number. So for this demo, we are going to use 3 staff. So we are presupposing that I, as the supervisor, I have 3 staff assigned to me to supervise. So I'm going to name them after the following. So the first one is Sharon, and her designation is storekeeper. Then the second one is Tehila, and she is the logistics officer. And then the third one is Jedidiah, and the position is clerical officer. Now we are going to use these 3 for the demonstration. Now, if I want to go to any of these staff, assuming we are running through the month and I want to look at her assessment for September, all I need to do is come over here and click September. You will see that it has opened to staff 1, whose name is Sharon, and it took me to somewhere close to September. Remember, I clicked September and it brought me here, so I can do whatever I want to do. Now I can quickly go back to the staff list view. When I click here, it brings me back to this point. Then I may decide, okay, I'm looking for Jedidiah and I want to go to December. So I come to here. Jedidiah is on row 4 and I'm coming to December column, which is O. I click this, it brings me to staff number 3, whose name is Jedidiah and is a clerical officer, and is bringing me to a point close to December. When I'm done what I'm doing, I click back here and it takes me back to the staff list sheet. So you will take time to read some of the guidelines that the guides that we have provided, both here and also here. Now let's go back to this point. I have written this. Now let's look at each staff, of each of these 3 staff. Staff number 1, the name is Sharon and is a clerical officer. Now this sheet is divided, the content are made into the 12 months of the year. So you can see that this is January, and then we have the column A, where we have the expected outcomes, the key performance indicator used to measure that outcome, the planned target for the month, what the staff has achieved for the month. Then the staff will appraise him or herself, and then we make some remarks or recommendations. And then here is the supervisors. This is the supervisors. Let me zoom this up, zoom this in. This is the supervisor's appraiser. Now, these two works in such a way that the staff will key in these details, the expected outcome, the KPI, the planned target, what he or she has achieved, and how she operates, how she appraises herself, and then makes her recommendation. you will see that they are having some content inside of them. This is because these parts, remember that we are looking at the supervisor's portal. So there are some parts that draw content from the individual staff. So all this area up to this point, the supervisor has no direct input access to them. What that means is the supervisor like myself, I cannot make inputs in any of these fields. You can see the sound is making that is protected. So once the staff opens his or her own link and then puts in the expected outcomes, the KPI, and fills up to this point, that will automatically populate on the supervisor's workbook. Now, let's go to each of these 3 staff. We chose 3 staff, and these 3 staff have been assigned to staff 1, staff 2, staff 3. Now let's go back to the folder and open staff 1. Again, when you open it, you may be prompted to enable content, and like I said, it's good to allow it so, more especially as this will be hosted in the cloud. Right now we are working with offline version, but it works the same. It's just that for the online one, it takes a while to synchronize, and then the data exchange will take place, but it works the same. Now this is staff 1. Already you see that this name has changed based on what the supervisor has written as the name. Now if the supervisor now decides, okay, this person's name is Sharon Emelike, for instance, when we go back to this, it updates Sharon Emelike, and so on and so forth. So here, as the storekeeper, maybe the expected outcome is to maintain optimum storage temperature for all products. Okay, so let me zoom in so that we can see that clearly. Now, assuming this is the expected outcome, one of the expected outcomes, and the KPI that has been chosen for this particular outcome is number of times the temperature was charted within a month. Now here, for clarity, maybe we are looking at up to, since we have 30 days, let's say up to 30 days. So this is the expected. Now the planned target, what we have used here is percentage. So you write 100% as your target. That means you need to chart for 30 days within the month. Now if at the end of the month you are able to achieve maybe only half of 30 days, let's say 15, so you're able to score 50%, so you can appraise yourself. Remember that appraiser can take maximum of 10. For the staff that is appraising him or herself, you can appraise yourself between 1 and 10. Now let's explore inputs that are within and outside the allowed range. It does not allow 0. I put 0, it does not allow. So you can take 1. Now taking 1, nothing seems to have happened. So he or she now makes her comment. Say, whatever. Let's say she wants to give a reason why she performed so low. There were other tasks that took me away from this task. She's done. Now she repeats the same thing for all the other expected outcomes, as many as they could be in a month. Now all she needs to do is, because this is real time, all she needs to do is to communicate to the supervisor to say, I have submitted my assessment for this month. And then she closes and continues with her other work. You see, she did not need to make any submission because this is real time. As she keeps typing, it is reflecting on the supervisor's workbook. Now let's open the supervisor's workbook and see what has happened. Go to staff 1. You see all that Sharon entered under the expected outcome. They are here. They are here. As a supervisor, even if you notice anything, you cannot make the correction. All that the supervisor is allowed to do is to come over here and make his or her own assessment. This person appraised herself as 1. Okay. Okay, let's go back there and see what that one represents. So what does this one represent? Okay, in terms of 1 to 10. But let's say she decided to make herself, 5. Okay, so she scores herself 5, knowing that this is half of this. Okay, so now let's go back to the supervisors. This is 5. The supervisor say, okay, yeah, let's give her 6. Now you see that this changes color. There is no color change here, but there's a color change here. The reason is this is what goes into the dashboard of the cluster, both for the individual person and for the cluster as a whole. Now let's take this minute and review the different color grades. So like I say, for the supervisor can issue maybe 0.1. Okay, it's not accepting 0.1, so it can accept 1. And so between 1 up to, actually, during the training that we had, we discovered that there could be need to get decimals. So this is going to be rectified to accept decimal. Okay, let me also check if it is the same thing elsewhere. 0.1. Okay, it's the same thing. So we are going to change that so that it can take decimal. Okay, the reason for the decimal is the observation was made that there could be some staff who did not come to work throughout that month, and then there were some who came to work but didn't do anything. Both of them didn't do anything, but at least they needed to give some marks to this person who came but didn't do anything. And so we felt, okay, there is need to get the system to accept decimal point. And so for that person who came and did nothing, you could decide to give 0.2. And then for the person who didn't come at all, you could decide to give 0. Okay, so I'm going to work on that to allow this to accept decimal. Okay, so let's now continue with what we want to look at. I want to see the different color gradients. So from 0 up to 4.9 is red. So because right now this cannot accept decimal point, so let's just see what happens with 5. So from 50 it goes yellow, and then from 7.5, I think it's not accepting this thing. Oh well, this has accepted decimal. Maybe let me look at that. Is it okay? Let me just see. Let me see what the issue is, what we have actually designed. Okay, minimum is 1, but it can accept decimal. Okay, so this is our definition. It can accept 1, and it can accept decimal, so it cannot accept 0, anything less than 1. Okay, we will tweak that to accept 0.1 for all these sheets. Okay, now so we have seen the 3 different color grades, and this is what is also depicted here. So red means 0.1 to 4.9, and it will turn to yellow once it gets to 5, which is equivalent to 50, on up to 7.49999. And then once it turns 7.5 to 10, it turns green. Okay, so we can get more of this from here. Now let's go back to this staff number 1. Now this person, the supervisor has graded this one, and then he could also put his or her feedback here. Now let's go back to this staff 1 to see the things that have happened here. You can see he or she appraised herself this way, and then what the supervisor has appraised, the assessment that he has called this staff, has also reflected here. Now here is still empty, and of course you know that from the staff end, he or she cannot make any input here, neither can he or she make input here. These are designated fields for the supervisor's input. Now let's go back to this, and then he decides to make to provide this feedback. So there were other tasks. Okay, let's work towards closing the gaps during next review period. This is the supervisor's feedback, for instance. And then when the staff opens, this is also shown here. So it does not matter where the staff is, so long as this is hosted in the cloud, they can communicate without distance barrier. Now, another thing we need to look at now is here, the staff has this trend that is longitudinal in nature. So at this point, you can see how you have performed across the past periods. And this takes the average of all the scores. So right now, it's only one score that you have for January, and it's showing this 75%. Now, we are just assuming that we are moving forward to the next month, and the next month here, assuming that the staff has made inputs on his or her portal or her page, and then it reflects here, and then the final assessment for this month comes from the supervisor, and the supervisor gives 8 and then gives the feedback. Well, let's just say this is the end of February. You can see this February here. Then when you go to the cluster dashboard of the cluster, this person scored 78%. That's the average of the 2 months. Now, if we also go to this individual person, this is 77.5, and it was approximated in the other side, making it 78. Then you can see the trend here. Let's see if we can zoom in. You can see the trend here. In January, this was 75%. In February, this was 80%. This and this gives us the average of 75%. Now, let's go to second staff. This is staff 1. So if you look at this dashboard, it's only staff 1 that is showing. Tehillah has not submitted. Neither has the supervisor graded Tehillah. So Tehillah is staff number 2. So this is Tehillah. Now let's go to our main and then our folder and open the staff number 2 file. Once this opens, you see Tehillah name has already appeared here, and the trend is still 0 because no assessment has happened yet. And then Tehillah does write his or her expected outcomes, KPI, the planned targets for the month, the percentage achieved. Let's say this one achieved 80%, and then he or she appraised herself to be 8, and then the rest is left for the supervisor to appraise. Now, assuming there were two expected outcomes, so the other one, she scored herself 9. Okay, sorry, this is 90%, and then she scores herself 9. I hope you are seeing this clearly. Let me just zoom. Okay, now let's go to the supervisor's page. This is the supervisor, and then let's go to staff number 2. So we see that staff number 2 has populated her end, so all that is left is for the supervisor to do his assessment. So he gives this person 7, which is yellow. This 7 is 70%. Now there are 2 activities in the same month, and then he scores 9, the supervisor also scores 9. So individual scores are retained, but the overall, the average for that month is displayed here, and it is this average for the month that shows on the dashboard. So now let's look at the dashboard. You see for Tehillah, this is 80%. For Sharon, this is 78. So the average of 78 and 80 is 79%. Now let me take this opportunity to take us also to this cluster data sheet. This is just showing you the data as the month progresses for each of the 3 staff. And we just put there to just show us the strength. Like you can see, this is a battery chart. It's just showing us, well, as a model, as a cluster, we are at 79% based on what has come in. And you can see this is also the same thing that is here, just that they are being represented in different charts. All right, so this is how this works. And let's go to the third one. Okay, so let's complete this for this number 2 staff. So number 2 may also have appraisal here, whatever. After filling that, she appraises herself 8, and writes the commendation. But of course, he or she cannot write on the supervisor's portion. And so we open the supervisor and go to staff 2 and see for the second month, which is February. And so there is a score here. So the supervisor will now say, well, you score yourself 8. Why not give you 6? And then the supervisor will provide the feedback, especially as to why he is scoring 6 rather than the 8. And then this feedback is what the staff receives and tries to see how he can make use of that feedback to improve in the next review period. However, if the staff feels he or she has strong reasons why she can contest this, she has the right to engage with the supervisor and show reasons why she deserves higher marks. Okay, that is how it works. And then for these two also, you will see that here we have 80%, here we have 60%. I think this may be 70% average for this person. Let's see. Of course, this is 70% for the two. And then when we go to the data sheet for the cluster, this person is also scoring 70% average here. And then when we go to that staff portal to see her trend, it's showing 70%. So you can also see that there is a trend of this person. Okay, so we can see repeat the same thing for staff number 3, since we decided to use 3 staff. So you can see that from the beginning there is no data here, and then this staff number 3, who is Jedediah, completes whatever and scores as himself, and this is 9, and makes his or her comment. And then the supervisor now looks at staff number 3 and says, okay, staff number 3 for January, let's again zoom, scores 9. And probably this guy did absolutely well, but because of humility, he started to score himself 9. But of course, the supervisor decided that he deserves 10. And then, of course, is the supervisor's assessment that is final. Okay, so when you look at the cluster data, here is 100 for Jedediah. Look at the dashboard, and of course, this is shooting up the performance of the cluster. And you look at this point for Jedediah is 100, and this has also shot the average for the cluster up. Now, I want to mention an interesting thing here. You know, the supervisor also is judged on how the cluster is working. Now, if the supervisor decides to assess anyone indiscriminately, it will show. And that supervisor, who also has another supervisor higher, will want to see how well is he motivating his team, how well is he supporting his team to produce the required yield. But now, he also judged if, assuming he was indiscriminate in awarding marks to make sure that he scores well, his supervisor, talking about this cluster supervisor will want to check, you are scoring great here, does this good performance, does it correlate with the output that the unit or the department is experiencing? So it's a kind of check such that the supervisor of this cluster does not award indiscriminate marks, does not score anybody lower than he or she deserves. So it's a check and balance system. So this is how this works, and then only towards the end of the year that one may decide what should happen to this. Of course, it's possible that we can get a new folder for a new year. All right, so this is how this works. And there is another level of assessment which does not pertain to the technical aspect of the jobs that we do, the job role, but rather it looks at the personal development components, the interpersonal relationship of this staff. So that is on a different platform, it's on a different discussions are ongoing on that to see how that can come to play, so that the assessment that is performed for a staff comprises of the assessment based on the technical components, as well as that other aspects of personal development, personal interpersonal relations, your respect, your those kind of soft skills that are used to assess one's performance. So the next thing I would like to discuss here is once the supervisor has made this assigning the staff number one, number two, as much as he has, as much as the number of supervisees under him. If he has up to 4, has up to 5, he assigns them here with their designations, and of course they will be populated on this respective sheet, and also be populated on the individual staff links. Now once that is done, all that needs to happen now is, because remember that these are hosted in the cloud, so right there in the cloud, I think maybe something like OneDrive for the supervisor. The supervisor will now click each of these to generate a link. So you click in, when you click, after this is hosted in the cloud, let's say like OneDrive for Microsoft, you click share, it will generate a link. Okay, it will generate a link. Forget this now, it's not in the proper way, but if it is in the cloud, you will generate a link which is now sent to this staff. You do the same thing for this staff number 2. You click and generate the link and send. Now I would even prefer that it be sent through email, but however, even if you send it through WhatsApp or even through text message, SMS, the person can still get the link and use it to access this. Now by accessing that link, you assign this to part number 1, part staff number 2. This part means performance assessment tool for staff number 1. Please, this should not be renamed, except if the ICT renames them, and of course adjust the links so that they can still speak to the same path. Otherwise, we may have issues with the linkage, because the part that is linked is usually what the system looks at. So inside the Excel is taking the name part staff 1 and this, part staff 2 and this, and so on and so forth. So if you change the name, it's easier to rectify if it is hosted in the cloud. It's easier to rectify. So if you change the name, you really need to do something to rectify the path. Okay, so those are the things that I wanted to bring to our attention. Again, for each of these, although it is protected that you cannot add or delete, you cannot delete these sheets, you cannot insert. If for any reason the passcode is discovered, please do not rename this. You cannot rename this. So these are grayed out, you can't rename them. Renaming these sheets can affect the linkages, because they are also linked. The names of the sheets, the names of the files are inside the path that is used to link them. Okay, so this is the much that we have for this demo. Thank you very much.